Welcome to OCL Soundwaves. I'm Tom Angeli for the Ocean County Library. And this is part 2 of the life of Jim Doremus, our artist from Manchester. You've seen his work in part 1 and heard a little bit about his background and his life in part 1. This time around, though, I have to address something that came up a couple of times in conversation, and I purposely walked around it because I wanted to focus on your art. But you dropped it in there, so I have to follow up. And it seems that in the middle of a fairly stable life, on the way toward retirement, you wound up working for the FBI. That's kind of like your barber telling you that he goes cliff diving in the off season, or your veterinarian telling you that he digs out landmines in his spare time. You seem like such a quiet guy. So how did you wind up in that?
Well, I had retired. I was working for a large printing company, and all their customers were located in the Twin Towers, or nearby the Twin Towers. And when the towers came down, they lost these huge customers. And at the time, I was a plant manager. And of course, they couldn't afford my salary anymore. They had lost all that business. So they let me go, and I retired for 3 months. And my wife told me that I needed to go and find something to do because I'm always full of energy, always getting in her way. But anyway, I went online, and I happened to find the job advertised by the FBI. And I thought, well, what the heck? What can I lose? I applied for the job. And they accepted my application. I went in and did all their testing, and they questioned my age because at the time I think I was 55, and it was a job in their security unit up in Fort Monmouth, their Information Technology Center, which is no longer there, so I can talk about it. But they, I was there for a couple of years, and then the BRAC Commission came along and closed down Fort Monmouth. So everyone that worked in the building was scattered around the country. I decided I didn't really want to move. My grandchildren were here, and they had an opening in the Manhattan office. So I went to work in the Manhattan office, and I commuted back and forth for quite a while. It was an interesting job. I worked in counterintelligence, counterterrorism. I can't get into details, obviously, but it was an interesting job, a fun job, met a lot of nice people, did a lot of interesting things.
Is that the kind of thing that if you told me you'd have to kill me? Or?
Yeah, well, we wouldn't really kill you, but they'd find a way. I would probably get killed if I told you.
But so let's get a time frame on this. When did you see this basically this want ad? And
it was shortly after 9/11, when the towers came down. I applied for the job, and it took a long time for them to go do my background checks and all of it. You have to, obviously, to go to work for them, you have to go through a lot of investigation on yourself and your background. They checked everybody in the neighborhoods that I lived in. They checked on past employers. They checked with people that I really didn't know, but I was acquainted with. And they just wanted to see what my character was like, I guess.
Okay, so we know it was a little after 9/11. We know you had a lot of clients in the towers. It's hard to believe now, but there are people graduating college who were born at that point. So give us, I mean, I kind of know the context, but give us your take on the context of the mood of the country at the time that you decided to do this. And was that debacle, did that contribute to your decision to do this?
Absolutely. I think the mood in the country was that people were very frightened because here now we're being attacked on our own soil, which for the most part had never happened before. And what they did was a very well laid out plan, and nobody was watching them. And so they, I think that it disturbed me to a point where even if I was out playing golf and an airplane flew overhead, I was checking it out, make sure that it was just a normal airline going over. But that went on for quite a while. So I think everybody was just really frightened at the time.
I can remember an extended period of time when there were no planes flying over.
Exactly, yeah. It was tough to get around anywhere. But fortunately, things have settled down, although the same type of scenario is still evident in this country, and we can't really let our guard down again. And unfortunately, people are beginning to forget, because, as you said, the people who were just born then are now college students, what have you. They have no idea what happened then. They read it in the books, but
so they get a version of it, but
yeah,
they don't get to live it.
exactly.
So you're 55. Now you've already moved the family back from up in New York State. You left the print shop, you came back, and at a point when other guys are looking toward the golf course and, not much else anymore, you decided to plunge headlong into this. So you must have had an incredible amount of patriotic fervor going on inside you.
Well, I did. When I was young, I wanted to join the Marine Corps, and that was 1965, right at the beginning of the Tet Offensive. And my parents discouraged me from, that was in Vietnam, the young people that aren't aware, but my parents talked me out of it, and I ended up going to art school, and I spent 2 years at the School of Visual Arts. And after 2 years, my then girlfriend and I decided we'd get married, and we got married in November of '71, and that's I'm sorry, we got married in October of '68, and in November of '71 we moved to upstate New York, and I received a notice from my draft board in 1970 that I've got this backwards here. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
We were married in '68. We decided to get married in '68. Shortly afterward, I received my draft notice. We gave up our apartment. I gave up my job. And I was all ready to go. I was ready to ship out in March of the following year to go to Paris Island for boot camp. And we discovered that my wife was pregnant. So I went down and let the draft board know what was going on. They ended up giving me a 2A deferment. So I went back to my wife and family. Now I'm out of a job, out of an apartment, and a friend of mine happened to be visiting from upstate New York, a fellow that I went to school with, and he said, "Why don't you come upstate New York and look around for a house up there?" So we did. We went up there, and we found a very nice house in a great neighborhood, and we stayed there until 1986 is when we finally sold the house. But my girls grew up there. I have 2 daughters, and both girls grew up there. Both learned how to ski, and they love the winter weather. Me, not so much. I'm not a big weather person, a winter weather person. I'd rather have the summer. But we stayed there till 1986, and during the time we were up there, I purchased a small print shop. And it was just a small mom and pop shop, and we owned that for, I guess it was about 13, 14 years. And we grew it into a fairly good sized business. And it was in 1984, December of '84, the temperature in our area dropped to 10 below zero. And you walked out of the house and everything hurt. Your nose froze shut. and it stayed at 10 below or colder for 48 straight days. And that's when I said to my wife, time to go back to New Jersey. So we sold the house up there, came back to New Jersey, and I decided, well, I should probably just take it easy now and retire. And that lasted about 3 months, and my wife finally said, you need to go find something to do, because I guess I was driving her crazy. So I went back to work, and I went to work for Mercedes-Benz in North America. I ran their print shop for 2 years. They were in a jam where they couldn't keep up with the production. My forte was to look at a production facility and see how I could make it better. And I turned them around, and they were doing somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 million to 1.5 million impressions. In other words, the sheets going through a press a year, or a month, excuse me. And they just couldn't keep up with the work. Well, after 3 months, I took them from 1.5 million impressions a month to over 3 million impressions a month. The object of my going to work there was that the boss, the director of the print shop, was supposed to retire. He had been fed up with it. But things were running so smoothly, he decided he wasn't going to retire. So I said, well, then I got to move along, because I'm not going to work for, and wait 10 years for you to retire. So I went to work for another fellow that I had met here in New Jersey. And they had a print shop that had been losing money for quite some time. The grandfather had started the business back in 1904, I believe it was. He ran the shop. The father then took it over, ran the shop, and then the 2 boys took it over and were running it with the father. And they had called me and said, look, we're losing money, and we can't figure out why. We sat down, we worked out a whole business plan for them. We fixed up their shop. I became their general manager. I had a 2-year contract with them. After 18 months, we went from 29 employees billing $75,000 a month down to 19 employees billing over $135,000 a month. And they decided we could do this without you. So after 18 months, I was out of work. And so I found other work in the printing industry. I went to work for a number of large printing companies. And one of the best print shops I ever had charge of was a place called the Beckley Press. And it was 2 companies in one, the Beckley Press and the Economics Press. The Economics Press was the parent company. And it was a beautiful print shop, totally conditioned inside, the air conditioning, the humidity, everything was absolutely perfect. And unfortunately, they had been in some financial trouble. And I was able to get them out of the trouble and keep them afloat for another 4 years through a series of different things that we did. But they had lost so much money that it was impossible to continue on. So I left there and ended up working in Karlstad for a company who owned whose customers were in the towers. And when the towers came down, again, I was out of work. So I said, okay, I'm retiring. That lasted about 3 months, and my wife said, you need to find something to do. So I said, oh, well, let me look around on the internet. And I happened to come across an ad for the FBI, and they were looking for security officers in their Fort Monmouth facility. So I said, well, what do I have to lose? So I went and I applied, and I heard from them, and I went in, did all of their testing. It was really extensive testing, and went through all of their background checks. And I had ended up with a very high security clearance. And when they closed the fort down, I then went into work for their counterintelligence and counterterrorism division out of Manhattan. And
So did you actually go out and chase the bad guys? Or what was your role? What was the function?
that I really can't get into. Most of what we did was classified, but in a sense, yeah, we did a lot of the street work for the uh, agents.
What did your family say when you came home and said, guess what? I'm going into counterterrorism.
That was a bit of a shock, but with all the decisions I've made through my life, my wife was okay with it. She knew that this was something that I wanted to do. I never did get into the Marine Corps, but I had two brothers that were both in the service. My dad was also in the service in World War II, and so I felt this is something that I really should do. Really should get into.
Was there ever a point throughout those 10 years when you said to yourself, why did I get in? What have I gotten myself into?
I never doubted it for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
No, it was a fun job. It was an exciting job. It could be dangerous at times, but it was something that they needed to be done. And I had a lot of support from my family, a lot of support from the FBI, and it's not something that I regret. Definitely, I enjoyed myself there. And
Jim, is it anything at all like it looks on television when you see the agents
well,
out on the field and they're all kind of snapping at each other and they got their guns drawn the whole
no. It's we all work together very well, and everybody has a role to play. And as long as you know your place and you do what you're supposed to do, there's never a problem. Unfortunately, with the FBI, real live FBI, we never solve cases in an hour. That's
shocked.
fantasy. In fact, I don't know if you remember, a number of years back, there was a group of Russian spies that were arrested and sent back to Russia. A beautiful red-headed young lady was part of their group, and I was able to do a small part in that at the very end, but they actually worked on that for over 10 years before they could put all the information together and arrest these people and get them out of the country. So it takes a long time. You have to have rock solid evidence. You can't, just because somebody said, Tom Mangelli is a bad guy.
That's not quite enough.
No. And the funny thing is, a lot of people are down on the FBI with, in the Boston Marathon, there were those fellows who placed the bombs.
The bombers.
It's true that somebody had turned them in much earlier, but what the public doesn't understand is the FBI, in order to open an investigation, the FBI has to go through a lot of, and this is mandated by Congress. Let's just say somebody turned them in. They had gone back to Russia and did whatever they did in Russia. When they came back, somebody made a complaint. The FBI looked into it, but by the rules set up by Congress, the FBI can only open a preliminary investigation, and that investigation can only last for a certain length of time. If they find nothing wrong in that period of time, they have to close the investigation. If they find something wrong, then they can open up a full investigation, which again can only last a certain length of time. Once that period of time is up, if these people don't do anything right, or excuse me, if they don't do anything wrong, the FBI has to shut it down again.
Mm-hmm.
And this is mandated by Congress. It's part of the law. So it's hard to...
So you're in this kind of murky world where you have to find this information, and you're on the clock, essentially. Like you're facing a timer.
Yeah, it's a slow clock, though.
Yeah.
Because everything has to be handled to that. You have to have documentation, rock solid documentation. You just can't have somebody arrested because you think they're a terrorist or you think that they're a spy. So,
Jim, how did this impact you in terms of your worldview, your personality? Did you come out of it different than you went in?
yeah, I think you would have to come out of it different. You become a little more cynical. Uh, I was, when I was a kid, like most college kids, I was very liberal in my thinking. It was the time of John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson. But then, the Vietnam War came along, and I went into business for myself, and I started to become more and more conservative. And now although I'm pretty much still a moderate, I lean toward the conservative side, and I don't get extreme, but I think everybody in this country needs to come back together and start listening to one another. And this extremism has gone out of hand.
Did your assignments ever take you far away from your home base, or were you always like basically commuting to Manhattan?
No, I traveled all over this country. And that's really...
So that must have gotten a rise out of the family when you came home and said, well, got to go on a business trip. I don't know when I'm coming back just yet.
That's exactly how it worked. And my wife was accepting of it. My girls were grown at that point. They had families of their own. So it was just my wife and I. But yeah, I mean, at times it got a little, what's
Did you
going
worry?
on? I'd never had time to worry.
Mm-hmm.
There were moments when I was scared to death, but for the most part, no, I didn't worry.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had a good team that I worked with, and we all had each other's back. So,
Did any of this experience impact or influence your art? Did you carry any of that over into the way you look at things?
no, I can't say that it did.
Because I'll tell you what I see in your art, and maybe it's just, I'm an amateur at it, but still, I see, except for the dogs and the close-up of the buildings, I see nature as an overpowering force. It's huge. It looms in the background. And even buildings and animals, birds, they seem small by comparison and kind of remote. And so I get a sense of isolation, and I get a sense of a kind of inevitability about the forces of nature around these isolated buildings and beings. So I don't know if you look at it that way.
It's an interesting point you bring up. I was always into nature. I was Boy Scout. I was a Boy Scout till I was, I guess, 17, 18 years old. And I went to a lot of Boy Scout camp for a number of years. I was a member of the Order of the Arrow. So everything that I did, even as a grown man, I loved to play golf because I liked being out in the natural settings. I liked it was quiet. I'm a quiet guy. I don't get. It takes a lot to get me upset, and I've had a lot of training with the FBI and through my art that keeps me calm. In fact, I'll sit and do the pointillist pictures with a pen while I'm watching TV. TV doesn't interest me that much. I can sit in an evening, knock out a good portion of a drawing. And if my wife is in watching TV, I'll a lot of times go in and just paint. find a TV noisemaker. I don't like noise.
It must be hard to look at a crime show without going, no, that's not how you do it.
Yeah, there are some crime shows that I get a kick out of, and again, they solve them all in an hour, so they're pretty good at what they do, I guess. But that's all acting, and the writers. There are a few TV shows that start out generally pretty good, and last for a long time. They'll go through a lot of seasons. But again, they just, it's not real life. And people look at, even going way back when I was a kid, the cowboy shows where the Hopalong Cassidy would pull out his gun and the guy was 100 yards away and he'd shoot the gun out of the other guy's hand. It doesn't happen. That's just fantasy.
So, bottom line, who do you equate with, Elliot Ness or James Bond?
More James Bond, but that's a real fantasy there. We're
not going to see you in the tux shaking or stirred?
I like my martinis shaken. Yes. But that's about as close as I get to James Bond too. So.
Thrilling life. Are you finished now, or are you going to have to go back out to work because the wife said you're getting on the foot again?
No, she kind of leaves me alone these days because I go in and I'll paint or draw, and I don't get in her way. But I think I'm done. But I'm not done with my art. I'm getting drawn into that more and more. I do a lot of research. In the respect that I watch a lot of tutorial videos online, and there are a number of people who are excellent in what they do, so I try to do different styles of painting, only because I find that through experimentation I'm finding my own way. I was always a detail-oriented kind of guy, and that's what helped me in my printing industry and in the production end. I was always detail-oriented. You had to line things up, otherwise, by the time you got to the end of the job, if something in the beginning was messed up, you were done at the end. So I was always detail-oriented, and now I'm finding these watercolorists who they do semi-abstract landscapes, and I'm trying to get into some of that so I don't get bogged down in the detail, because with the watercolor I find I can't get involved in detail because I turn everything muddy. It just the colors lose their vibrancy. But it's fun to try. But I have stacks and stacks of watercolors. In fact, I just went through some yesterday. I threw a whole bunch of stuff away. But,
well, in that case, I suppose that we're headed for episode 3 down the line somewhere.
Well, maybe. I'd be happy to come and talk to you.
Friends, for more great virtual programming, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, and Snapchat. And of course, you can find out everything that's going on at the library at theoceancountylibrary.org.
Support public libraries. Like, share, and subscribe for more great videos.